Okay, so this is the first production tutorial that I'm going to start putting up on my YouTube channel. I've just recently started putting some tips and hints and things up on my Instagram, so I thought I'd start to do some videos to accompany those. First one I'm going to look at is one of the tips I put out the other day. It was to do with like tightening up and cleaning up an old break, so I thought I'd have a look at that one. So we'll get straight into it. So the break that I've got loaded up is the Hotpants break. Really nice break, nice hi-hats and sort of tambourine-y, shakery sounds. Really nice break. The snare's got a nice little ring to it as well, but there's quite a lot of noise going on. If we just have a listen, just get the spectrum analyzer up. You can see there's quite a lot of low end in there, and there's a lot of sort of room noise and ambience that we could do with just cleaning up just a little bit, especially when you're looking to layer breaks with other breaks and other sounds and things like that. You get a build up, so it's always good to sort of clean them up, and you can go as extreme with this as you want. So the technique that I'm going to look at is using a multiband envelope shaper to do that, and I'm going to do it two ways. So I'm going to do it simple way, quick way, just basically affecting the single break, and then do a slightly more advanced way where I have a look at chopping up into sort of component parts of the break and sort of cleaning it up just a little bit further. First thing you want to do, or the first thing that I do, is probably roll off a little bit at the bottom end. So all these tutorials I'm going to do are going to be in Cubase, so if you've got Cubase, there's a couple of things that you can do that may be different to in other DAWs, but I'll sort of show different ways to do that. So if you have got Cubase, you've got these input filters, which are quite nice. So you can use those to roll off a little bit at the low end. Just gets rid of a little bit of that rumble. But if you haven't got those, what we'll do is we'll jump in, just get up just go with Cubase's stock EQ. I've got a default that loads up that's already got a low cut on it, but we'll just bring that back and just try and find that sweet spot just to take out a little bit of the low end. There's not a lot of difference to the sound, but it's just, you can see it's just clean up a little bit at the bottom there, and you don't really need that. You don't need to go too severe at this point. You're just trying to clean up and tighten up the break. You may want to layer it, you may want to use it as your main sort of break in the track, so you don't want to go too severe on it. But that'll do for now. And then what we'll do is load up a multiband envelope shaper. So again, I'm going to go for the stock Cubase one. Now you can get results just using a straight up transient shaper, something like a transient master or just a standard envelope. If I just show you something like this, but this is sort of they work on whole band, basically they're working on the whole frequency spectrum, whereas if you go for something like the multiband, it means you can focus in on different areas. So what I normally do is have a listen through, try and find the crossover points really, where you can zone in on the particular different sounds within that break. So if I just solo the low band, you can hear some of the snares starting to get in there, so I'll probably pull it down a little bit. So we're kind of just affecting those kick frequencies, real low end, and just pull that back a touch. So it's just tightening them just a little bit. Move on to the snare region. So you've got a bit of the hats in there, so I'll probably lower that down a bit. Have a listen in the hats. Just to make sure we're zoning on the right bit. pull that back a couple of dB. Got quite a nice ring to it on this break, so you don't want to go too severe. And I'll probably just put a little bit of a bump on the transient. Again, nothing too crazy, just you know, a dB maybe, or 2 dB is often enough just to give it a bit of extra pop. And I'll do the same for the upper band. And then just pull in the reeds just a little bit. Now if we listen without that on. Probably tighten up the top just a little bit more. As you can see, because we've added a little bit onto the transients, it's going over a little bit, so I'll just pull that back a little bit just to get that so it's not going over. And if we listen with all of it turned off. Just tighten it up really nice. It's just nothing too drastic. Like, you know, you can go in and change these settings. You can make it a little bit more severe if you want to. You can tighten it up a lot further than that. It just depends on the sound that you're going for, really. But for me, for like a first stage, that's probably about enough just to get you going to something that you can work with. At that point, then you could then bounce that out to audio if you wanted to. You've got a nice clean break to start working with and start chopping that up. And that's it. That's the sort of quick, easy way, really. So using, you know, transient shapers, which a lot of people probably use quite a bit, but multiband, I just find it just gives you that a little bit of extra control. Okay, so the second way is a little bit more advanced, just a little bit more detailed, really. Again, just giving you just that extra little bit of control, and this is the way that I'd probably go about it. So what I've done is I've copied the break again onto the next track, and that's just for chopping up. So what I would normally do is I'd take off any snap to grid and also select snap to zero crossing. What that's going to do is make sure it's catching the waveform when you go in through zero, which is hopefully going to prevent any nasty pops and clicks and things like that. So if we just zoom in a bit further there, we just got to go in and find all those hits, basically. So I know that there's going to be a kick and then there's 3 sort of hi-hats in there, so we just got to go along. We can see where those little transients are. Because it's an old break, they're not as clear, and this is part of the reason why we're doing it, really, to try and sort of clean that up. So just find where you think those are, and as you can see, it's kind of jumping around a little bit. Find the best place you think to go. Again, I mean, you'd probably spend a little bit longer on this, but I'm just going to do it fairly quickly. And so what we end up with is the break fully chopped up into all of our hits. And what we'll do then is then just duplicate that so that we've got all of our hits on different channels. So I'm just going to do that, duplicate a couple of times. And we've now got the break 3 times. So what we can do is then go through and just pick out the different hits that we want. So I know that these are the kicks, so I'm going to get rid of those. That leaves us with just the kicks. Then we get rid of everything else apart from the snares on the next one. And then the final one, we do the opposite of the other 2, so we can just see there that we've got those. So we just delete anything that is in there. Hold on. Go back. That's a kick. That's a snare. There we go. So yeah, we go through and then we do the opposite of all of that. So we take out everything that is in between. And what we should be left with when we play is the full break again. So it's exactly the same. Obviously we haven't cleaned it up yet. So if we're looking on there, Obviously, we've got although because we've duplicated, it's automatically added those things to it. So those inserts that were in there has been added to those channels. So it's kind of tightening it up in the same way, but across all 3 tracks. What we can do then is we can then go in and have a look, and then we can be a little bit more sort of drastic with the things that we do, because even listening to this first one, there's still quite a bit of low end rumble in stuff that doesn't need it, and we can definitely get it a little bit tighter. So what we can do is go and look at individual hits. So let's have a listen to the kick. I can go a little bit steeper on that. See the main energy coming down there really, and anything below that is probably just a bit of rumble, so we can oops, about there. Then we get our multiband up again, and then this time, because we're dealing with the individual hits, we can sort of go in a little bit different. So let's solo those. Probably all right there. This region is sort of the mid of our kick. This is where maybe a lot of the bleed's going to be, or the sort of the room noise on that kick, or the sort of the spill, or whatever you want to call it. So we can really tighten that up. And then we've got our hi-hat on the top. Okay, so that's the kick layer. Go on to the snare. Now in this one, this is where we can probably go a little bit higher with the EQ. So we've got a cut where the kick was, but we've got a lot of energy down here in the region where the kick would be. And obviously we don't want the break to lose all its life, but generally you can see a lot of the energy around there is about 370 and a little bit below around the 200, which is fine, but we can probably get rid of some of this. We don't want to get rid of all of it, but we don't really need any of this down here, so we can take that off. It's not massively changing the sound, but it is affecting it. And that's all going to help later on in the mix, and when, like I say, you're adding other breaks and other bits and different things. So let's go into the multiband. Now we can hear in that region there below, that's currently set at 137, we can hear below that there is quite a lot of just noise, really, sort of dump. We don't really need that. What I'd normally do is probably pull that back, definitely, so it's a lot lower than where we want to be, the content that we want to keep, and I'd probably just pull that down completely, just to get rid of that completely. And then we can then zone in on the different elements of that. And like I say, you can go as harsh as you want on this. If you want a really tight snare, you can pull that back in. It's got a really nice ring on it, so you don't want to lose all of it. And then for the top layer, again, this is where you're going to sort of hear. This is part of the shaker part. So, you know, if you want really tight hats, you're going to go a little bit further back on this particular element. That's about right. And I've just had a little bit of a boost as well, obviously from before. That sounds probably about enough for me. I'll probably leave that about the same. And again, we've probably boosted a little bit there, so we can just pull that back just a touch. That'll do. So we'll listen to those two together. Cool. And then onto the shakers and the hats. So if we go into there, you can see there's a lot of noise down the bottom, a lot of rumble. You don't need that at all. And if you listen carefully, you can hear a few little clicks, just little bits. That's because we've probably where we've chopped it is just a little bit late or whatever. So we can clean out. We'll clean that up in a sec. But we'll just deal with the EQ and the multiband for now, because we might fix that in doing that. Just going to move that up. Now, there are some snares in there, so you don't want to totally get rid of those. If you're doing this on a break where there's some snares in that particular bit, you know, you're going to want a little bit of that, but you don't want all that low end. Just to the difference there, it's massive. That'll do for that. And then we'll go and listen to the hats on the multiband. See, there's nothing really. You can see there's some sound in there, but we can't really hear it. But again, because we know that we've cut around about 200 there, you know, if we were to be conservative, about 137, if we were to pull that down completely, that's not going to make any difference. And then we have a list of the different elements again. It's probably a good idea to keep these fairly similar to what you've done on your other settings elsewhere. So obviously, go back and have a look at that. Crossover was about 4.1, and in that one, we'll change that to the same. Now this has got the little shuffle in it, so you may want that a little bit tighter. It's probably too much. And then the top layer. I can see they've both got a little bit of a push on the transient, just something, just a couple of dB, but that sounds all right to me. You probably spend a little bit more time tweaking that, but just showing you the general idea of what we're doing. Unsolo that. Now we can hear a couple of little clicks in there. Seems to be in that one, I think. So I'm just going to sort that out. I'll see if we can. Now this particular break, if you listen to the original, it was a bit clicky anyway, so you'd probably go in, and doing this would give you the ability to go in and sort of do some little fades on the beginning, and what you can do is just do some tiny little fades just to try and take a little bit of that off and just clean those up a little bit. So that's something that you can do. So let's have a listen to those together. And then if we have a listen to the original, or the one we did first. So much cleaner. Obviously it's going to be a little, you know, some of the parts of it will be slightly thinner in terms of sound, because you've taken some of the low end out, but we've still kept most of the vibe of the original break, but it's just a hell of a lot cleaner. What you can do with that then, if you want to, is you could sort of route those to a group and then keep them as they are like that. Or what you might want to do, if you've got Cubase, or other DAWs will do this as well, what you could do is render in place. If I go render settings, Hotpants clean, that's already in there, and we'll click render. What that's going to do is put it into a single file for you, and then you've got a nice clean version of the break. And if we just drag that up there, we can sort of see that side by side with that. Now it is a little bit quieter, and you can sort of match that for level, but you can see it's a hell of a lot cleaner. We can now see where the individual hits are. We can now see what's going on a little bit better. And obviously you're probably going to apply a little bit more processing afterwards and do different bits to it. But this, you know, is a first stage to get you something that you can work with. This is definitely enough. So what I will say is I've done this at the tempo that the break was, or as close to it as I could get. If I just mute those two there, if I go in and just unmute these parts here, because we've done it at that, what we've now got the option of doing, because we've cut it at the actual speed of the break, it makes it a little bit easier to do, but we can then speed that up. And because it's in audio, all it's going to do is play everything that little bit faster. Now what you might find is you've got some little overlaps, but you can just go in, and if you've got things like the hats like that, you probably want to go in and you don't want those necessarily overlapping. Some people will maybe do little crossfades in there and get those going. But regardless of the rest of it, if you've got little overlaps there, because we've cleaned these up nicely and because we've created a bit of separation between these, leaving those little overlaps in is not necessarily going to be a problem, because what it's going to do is going to keep a little bit more of the vibe of the original break. And you're not really going to get any issues with that. But if you do, obviously you can go in and you can pull those back and sort of set those so you're not getting any overlap. Also, when you've got it like this, what you've got the chance to do, or the opportunity to do, is you can then move certain hits. So if we snap to the grid on there, we can then see that that snare was just slightly off, so we can just move that on. Again, we could do the same with the kicks. So that just gives you a little bit more control again, and obviously helps getting in with the sort of keeping with the quantize or the time, and any other things that are going on where you track different breaks. So having it like that is, again, like I say, it's going to give you way more control. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, subscribe, because I'm going to be posting a lot more of these, hopefully, over the next few weeks, months. And like I say, I've been posting some things on Instagram. So when I stick a tip or a sort of tip or trick on there, what I'm going to try and do is follow that up with a little video just to show how I would go about doing it. Okay, cheers.